when someone has sex with you one night and then that person has sex with somebody else the next night, why does that hurt so much? Because you have been treated as dispensable, replaceable, and repeatable. That's why it hurts so much. You are indispensable, you are irreplaceable, you are unrepeatable.
I have a question about waiting for marriage. I've been blessed by the theology of the body, as it has given a deep understanding of our dignity and why sexual acts communicate lifelong commitment and should be saved for marriage. I never had this growing up, and it has changed my life.
Praise God.
I have many friends who are not receptive to this idea because of what our culture teaches, and I want to share with them. I'm wondering, could you give a non-religious explanation of this? Perhaps an appeal to natural law or reasoning that's accessible to secular people?
These truths are written right in our hearts. The human being, if we are honest with ourselves, we know the difference between being loved and being used.
Mm-hmm.
We desire to be loved, but we often settle for being used. Another way of saying it is we desire to be seen, but we often settle for being looked at. And one of the things I'll do with an audience, I'll say, ladies, how many of you prefer to be looked at rather than seen? And never has a hand gone up. How many of you prefer to be seen? Hands go up immediately. We intuit that there is a profound difference. And what is it? What is the difference? To be looked at is to be evaluated as a thing. To be seen is to be acknowledged as a person. Things are dispensable. My toaster breaks, or our toaster breaks, and we throw it away if we can't repair it. We get a new one because toasters are not only dispensable, they're replaceable.
Mm-hmm.
And we could get the exact same model toaster we just had because toasters are also repeatable.
Mm-hmm.
Things, therefore, are dispensable, replaceable, and repeatable. But the word person, which was actually coined by early Christians to distinguish what the human being is and to understand the three persons of the Trinity. I understand we're getting into a conversation of faith here, but even the secular world has adopted this word person, and it distinguishes what we are. We are not merely things. We are not merely objects. We are not merely something. We are someone. And a person or the person is someone who is indispensable. When we are used and then thrown away, it wounds us. And that experience of being wounded is the experience of recognizing I'm not meant to be thrown away. I'm indispensable. When we are replaced by someone else and we feel that wound of being replaced, we are recognizing it hurts because I am irreplaceable. When someone tries to imagine that, here's an example, like suppose a man's married to a twin, an identical twin, and she dies, and he's distraught because he lost his wife, and someone were to come up to him and say, "Oh, why are you so sad? Her identical twin's available, and I'm sure she'd want to marry you." It fails to recognize the human person is unrepeatable, indispensable, irreplaceable, unrepeatable. Sexual union is meant to express, I see you as indispensable, irreplaceable, unrepeatable. And I love you as indispensable, irreplaceable, and unrepeatable. And to see that and honor that means of its very nature, I will never leave you. I will never replace you with someone else. I will never throw you away. I will never try to repeat this experience I'm having with you with someone else, because you are indispensable, irreplaceable, and unrepeatable. Mm-hmm. And I would say to this questioner, if you can guide even the most secular atheist person on an honest reflection into the heart of the difference between being something and someone, and if you can get the person to recognize the wound of being treated as something rather than someone, the wound of being dispensed with, the wound of being replaced, the wound of being repeated, then you have the person acknowledging the deepest truth of what it means to be human. I'm indispensable, irreplaceable, and unrepeatable, which means I'm meant to be loved, not used.
Mm-hmm.
Then, if you can get that person to acknowledge that sexual intercourse is meant to be the experience of that kind of love, now we have a basis rooted in our own experience of existence. Why does it hurt so much?
Yeah, that's so important.
When someone has sex with you one night and then that person has sex with somebody else the next night, why does that hurt so much?
Mm-hmm.
Because you have been treated as dispensable, replaceable, and repeatable. That's why it hurts so much. You are indispensable, you are irreplaceable, you are unrepeatable. We can have that conversation without ever appealing to faith or the Bible or revelation. This is human experience.
Yeah, and I think I love how it sort of illustrates what's different about human persons versus animals in their
Right.
experience. And I think, in the current world, there's kind of a lot of looking at, well, in nature, in other mammals, for example, there isn't this same
Yes.
notion of marriage.
Yes.
So why are we putting that on human beings? And yet all that you just said illustrates, especially, why does it hurt?
Yeah.
That speaks to we're different. And I think another thing that speaks to our difference is the needs of our children. The years of dedicated parenting of the whole person that's required of parents, of human parents.
Yes.
And the connection of that with our union, that
You're
we're
bringing
meant-
up a very important point, if I can just
Sure,
put it
go,
aside, is we can't see this vision of the person and how it's related to sexual union when we're wearing, as I say, condom-colored glasses. When we remove the element of fertility, we are reducing the other person to a thing, and we are reducing the sexual act from a total gift of self to an act of using the other. And we remove, as soon as you remove fertility, but we put it this way, look at sex in its natural capacity and reality, and it is very clear sex and babies go together.
Right.
And the teaching of the church has always been, in a nutshell, marriage, sex, and babies belong together and in that order.
Mm-hmm.
When you remove fertility, when you remove the baby from the equation, you're also removing really the necessity of the commitment, because, now it's just something recreational.
And I think that expression people sometimes use, it's not hurting anyone.
Yeah.
That defense. It's not who's hurt, who's being hurt. If there's like an intentional blindness about the pain going throughout the whole of society and the effects of that, so many people are being hurt.
This is Kim Biddle, an award-winning social worker who's dedicated her life to serving the sexually wounded. And she speaks pointedly to this yearning to be loved in our entirety, body and soul. This is her quote. "I think in the heart of a woman, we want to be seen as truly beautiful, someone to be treasured and lifted up. And we're constantly hoping, that someone will not exploit, not degrade, but treasure who we are, who we really are. And that's at the heart of all of us, male and female. We all need to be known, to have human connection, to be seen, and to still be loved in that place.
Mm-hmm.
If we're keeping parts hidden, or just displaying one thing, or compartmentalizing our life, it's preventing us from being liberated in who we are in our fullness. There needs to be a resurgence," she says, "in our culture that values humanity, that values a man and values a woman for their entirety, mind, body, and soul."
Wow.
And what I want to say is, if we see the real value and dignity of the person as indispensable, irreplaceable, unrepeatable, that value of the person, of every human person, is so great that it warrants the commitment. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. That's how valuable you are. I'm not going to reduce you to a thing to use for my pleasure. And even in our commitment, if we hit rocky roads, which inevitably you will, when it gets difficult, that pledge is there. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. The marital embrace, and that's why we call it the marital embrace, because it expresses that commitment, that level of love. When you know that and desire to express that kind of honoring of the other, it becomes unthinkable to engage in that act without that commitment. Because you're splitting yourself, you're rupturing yourself. You can't make yourself as vulnerable as the act calls you to make yourself if you haven't made that commitment. And so I think you brought up a good point, Wendy. We end up, to justify our behavior, or because we're just so wounded, we pretend we're not hurting one another here when we really, really are, because we're not recognizing the true value and dignity of the person. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. If you want to share it with people who need to hear this message, please do that, and consider subscribing to the channel.